button, we will get started. Welcome, everybody. My name is Patrick Snow, host of the Patrick and Mary Unstoppable Author Interview Series. We have viewers from all over the world listening today, both live and on the web, and we are so thrilled to introduce our guest today, Joanne Holbrook. Her book is titled Your Passport to Parenting: Wisdom from Around the World to help build happy families. If you want to multitask and see her online, you can also go to yourpassporttoparenting.com. I'm going to read her exciting bio, and then we are going to begin. So Joanne Holbrook is a mother of 2 children and a spouse to a United States Army officer who has lived and raised her family in South Africa, England, Germany, Australia, and across the United States. Born in South Africa and living half of her life under the controlling apartheid government, she began to yearn for a better understanding of cultures outside of her world. This experience, combined with the world travels that combined with military lifestyle and her teaching and performing art schools for the last 25 years, has allowed Joanne to observe culture and parenting from multiple international perspectives with a broader worldview. She is an author, a professional keynote speaker, a parenting coach and advocate, and entrepreneur who, through her friendships, book, and speaking events, shares parenting stories to help build positive, value-based families around the world. Please join me in welcoming our special guest, Joanne Holbrook.
Hello. Thank you.
How are you doing? Welcome back. We are thrilled to have you on again by popular demand.
So good to be here. So good to see you guys.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, why don't you share real quickly? I knew you were in Australia when we met. How did we connect originally? Because you were in Canberra, Australia at the time, I believe, living.
I was, and I had a book on my heart, and I didn't have the guts to do it. And I saw someone that I knew randomly. I met her once, became friends on Facebook, and she was doing a book signing event. And all of a sudden she said, "Hey, if you want some help writing a book, let me know." And for some unknown reason, I messaged her and said, "Hey, what have you got?" And she said, "Well, let me introduce you to this man named Patrick Snow." And she said, "Just speak to him." And I was shivering in my boots, and we spoke, and I think the next week I was writing a book. So that's pretty much how we got together.
And that was Karen Emmenheiser, right? Is that right?
It was. Yeah.
Well, I have 2 boys that are 30 and 27. And what I love the most about reading your book is like, oh, I did this right. And oh, I did this wrong. Or I could have improved in this area and I could have done this differently. And so your book is fantastic. I recommend anybody getting a copy. It makes for a great Mother's Day gift, Father's Day gift, and especially anyone that's getting married and they're looking to have a family. It's a great book to start that off with. So
and it's on Audible.
Oh, it's on Audible too. Yes, I've listened to your Audible. It's spectacular. We have so many questions today. I don't know where to begin, but let's just start here. As a military wife, you've been exposed to many frequent moves in different cultures. So can you share more about your journey and how it influenced both you and your family?
Yeah, well, I really didn't mean to start on this journey at all. And I left South Africa at 26. You know, I was performing artist, and I was a performing arts teacher. And I went to London, met my husband, who was out for a weekend in London from Germany. And it pretty much went like that. And I always, from those days, I was always a stranger in my environment. I was never the local person and that. And then we moved to the US, and I had a baby there, and I was trying to lean on my community. And then we moved to, Kansas, then Washington, then back to the UK. And it really was when we hit the UK that everything was so different again. But this time I had 2 little babies, and I had to really lean on moms to teach me, how does the school system work? How does this work? How does that work? But what happened in that time, and little did I know at the time, was I started meeting people, and then I sat interviewing. I probably grilled them. And I just wanted to know more, like, how do you do this? Why do you do that? And it started becoming this obsession for me to meet people who I considered successful parents and find out why they did certain things, and especially going to older parents, asking them, what did you do right? What is the best thing you did? And I started going around the world throughout our world travels, through Germany and Europe and, back to South Africa and Australia and the US and now in Hawaii, and just finding out, what did you do well? And if you put all those things together, it's pretty amazing what you can find, and I had access to all these people from different parts of the world that most people don't have access to. So that's really how it started, was just by sharing these silly little stories, what I thought was silly at the beginning, with my friends, and then them all going, can you just write these down? Please, can you just write this down? I'm never going to remember this. And that's how I started just writing these stories down, and plus saw the bigger picture.
So it was their encouragement for you to do this. That was what made you ultimately decide to write Passport to Parenting.
Absolutely. It was my friends. I mean, I only had my babies in my 30s. My friends were even having them later than that. So I was the first one, and they were all like, can you just help me out? I'm late on the game, and all of that. So, so it was them that kept on saying, can you just write this down? And I really didn't mean for it to become a big deal. I just wanted to write them down so I wouldn't forget, is how it started.
Wow. Well, I want to take you back to a question that maybe every parent struggles with, and that is it the role of a parent to be the disciplinarian or their friend or both? And I think everybody wants to know that. I've certainly did, and I've always tended to be more their friend and their disciplinarian, because if they didn't get in trouble, there was no reason to discipline them. But their mother's like, no, you can't be their friend. You have to be their disciplinarian. And so tell me your philosophy on that.
I think we ebb and flow as parents. I don't think that we can be one thing. The other thing is, if you have a partner, decide who does what when, have, good cop, bad cop kind of scenario. But I don't think there's an absolute for anything. I think on everything I've learned is that there is more than one way to do everything. You do not have to have a family and go, I'm going to be this. You can ebb and flow and change as you go along, as the child changes, as the child goes into its next phase. And I think a lot of times people, they have a baby, and all of a sudden they're like, this is how I'm going to be. Well, it's not, because life's going to change. You're going to change. The children are going to grow. They're going to, mature. And I think that when it's necessary, definitely discipline as you see fit and as it feels right for you. But I don't think there's anything wrong with raising children that you like and you want to hang out with.
Wow.
I think that being with these people that I like, why would I want to not be their friend? But other times I come out as, mama bear, and sometimes that's got to happen too. But it does change sometimes.
Well, take us back to your childhood growing up in South Africa. I think it's amazing what I've learned about you, how much different, your life was in the 80s and 90s growing up in South Africa compared to us here in the US. So what was that like with your mother, your father, and any other amazing influencers in your life as a young girl?
I was brought up as a white privileged woman, a child in South Africa, which was a completely different story to other people. And I advise you to read Trevor Noah's book, Born a Crime. It's totally eye-opening for a lot of people. And his is definitely the other side. My side was that I didn't even know what was going on. What I did know was that something wasn't quite right. I didn't know what it was because I had no concept to compare it to. We were in sanctions, our TV was monitored, what we learned from school was monitored. We weren't allowed to talk to people who weren't like us. And I remember that being the biggest thing that has probably influenced my parenting now more than anything, because when the apartheid lifted and I went to college, I had the opportunity to talk to all these people that previously I wasn't allowed to ever speak to. And I realized how much have I lost? How many friendships have I lost? How many lessons have I lost by not being able to speak to people that were not like me? And, when I moved to overseas and that, I went on a mission to find as many people as I could. When I lived in London, I said, I have the opportunity to meet someone from every corner of the globe every single day. And I would sit on the bus. Where are you from? What do you do? How did you get here? So I've always been curious about people. But, I think that with my children, I'm very much a believer that you have to put them in front of as many different kinds of people, ages, economic backgrounds, colors, cultures as possible, so that they're not intimidated by people. Because I was intimidated for a while, and I don't want that. So, in Germany, I used to make my children go and speak to Germans that they couldn't speak the language. I made them go figure it out. I was like, you're going to be in situations where people don't speak your language, figure it out. So I used to push my 7-year-old in front of Germans, and I'd say, go do that for me. And I really feel like it's benefited them. And I share this with my parents all the time. I'm saying, don't sit in your little bubble and expose them to more people that they can be learning from and having relationships and all of that. So I think that was the biggest thing about the apartheid. I mean, there's so much. And in my book, I have quite a lot of stories about how it was to be a child in those days, but that was probably the one that I carried over the most, definitely.
Wow. Amazing. So can you share some of your favorite parenting strategies, or maybe some examples that you picked up in some of these different countries that you want to share?
Yeah. So I'll share the one that is probably the one that's the easiest to do and the most simple. And it's the one that I'm not sure why we are not taught this the minute we find out we are pregnant, because I think it's the game changer in any family, and anybody can do it. And in all my courses, it's always like day one. It's what we do. And I learned it from a woman. She was a magistrate. She was my landlord as well in the UK. We used to live in the Cotswolds, and I lived on a barn on a farm. And every Sunday, the landlord, who was the quintessential English woman, would serve a Sunday roast to everyone who lived on her farm and her land. And I'm talking, you can imagine manor houses with the round driveways, that kind of environment. And every Sunday we would sit at this huge table, and her children would come, and I would watch them. And at the time, my children were 3 and 5, and I would watch her with her children. And I said to my husband, I'm not sure what it is, but whatever she has, I want that when my kids are older. And anyway, a few weeks later, I invited her over, and I asked her the question. I said, how did you get that? I don't know what it was, but I want that. What was the recipe for that success as a parent? Because I considered her a successful parent. And she said to me the best advice ever. She said she never lectured her children. So what she did was she took situations, and she was a magistrate. So she had the luxury of having courtroom discussions at the table at night and that. And she said she would get them to ask her questions about whatever she wanted to teach them. Because often, I mean, we've all been there. Even if I teach it, sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I'm doing it. But sometimes, you go, I am going to, you have to do this, and you have, no, the kids are like out the door. And sometimes you have to stop and go get them interested first. So let's say she wanted to talk about drugs, for say, and she'd say, oh, I'm not going to tell you. No, I'm not going to tell you. And they'd be like, what, Mom? Tell us, Mom. All of a sudden they're interested. And then she would say, oh, well, this young kid came into the courtroom today, and he was selling drugs at school. And they were like, what? And then she waits for them to ask a question. And then they ask a question. And then she gives them the answers, and she puts in what she wants them to hear in that conversation. And, a lot of it, obviously not all of us have a courtroom to draw on, but we can use our own stories. We can use the news. We can use what happened to somebody else. And I'm not talking gossip. I'm just talking stories that you can get the kids coming back and flow with the conversation. So it's two-way instead of a one-way conversation. And she said she believes that strategy is what gave her the adult relationship that she has with her children now. Because even as adults, she's already started that communication line. It's always been there. It's been back and forth. It's never just been the parent doing this and the child taking it. And she said, as adults and as teens, when things get real, when life gets complicated for them, the communication line was already set up. She just kept it going the whole way through their adolescence and into adulthood. So I think that was the story that actually catapulted my interest in, if you have this, what do other people have? that you're not
There's
telling.
another story of Fiji, I think. I was so intrigued by that. Can you share us that little strategy?
Oh yeah. So Fiji was the best place for me because I think it is the happiest place on earth. People who have nothing, and are the happiest people. And that for me was amazing. And everywhere you go, there's just happy people. From the minute you arrive, all people are like "bula" all the time. And if I drove past a house that was on fire, and everyone stopped putting the fire out to greet us and go "bula, hello," and just happy all the time. And I was so blown away by this happiness that we chartered a boat one day because my husband's a surfer and he had to surf certain breaks. And we had a surfer with us and a fisherman who took us in their boat, and their names were Ice and Wise. And I always talk about Ice because he was like the coolest ever. He was like Lenny Kravitz cool. He was just a 28-year-old man. He was so cool. And I said to him, tell me why Fijians are so kind and happy, and they have so much to complain about, but nobody's complaining. They're just sharing this joy all the time. And he told me a story about when he was 5, his dad took him with they lived still there in little villages on the little islands. And he said they went with the other villagers into the forest to hunt. And when they got into the forest, these ants started biting him. And he said he was crying and he was like, ow, 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 why are these ants biting me? And he was all about this. And his dad eventually had enough. So he grabbed him by the scruff of his neck, pulled him aside, and he said, you will stop complaining because everybody's getting bitten by ants. And he said, the minute you complain about your pain, you alert everybody in the village to their pain.
Wow.
And that is how they're brought up, to not show their pain. They're just meant to help each other so much that the whole community feels less pain.
They're kind of raising the consciousness of everybody, focusing on the positive.
Absolutely. And that, to me, I just sat there in I think the rest of the trip, I was just like, wow, that is so simple and easy to do. Wow. So easy. Yeah.
Wow. And some of our kids today, they're just worried they don't get enough time to play video games. And you compare that to the red ants.
It's true. It gives perspective. So
it sure does.
Yeah.
Well, was there anything that you learned that seemed counterintuitive, or maybe you were super surprised by?
Yes. When we moved to Germany, I was that mom who believed that I had to be everything to everybody. I had to be the perfect mom and the perfect wife and the perfect, my husband was had a job at that time that I had to be at, and I had to, still have a job, my entrepreneurial business on the side. And and it was burning me out. And I felt like I was failing at all of those things. I never felt like I ever got to a place. And little did I know that moving to Germany was actually exactly what I needed, because we would go out at night with our kids and people would look at us and go, you brought your kids? What are you doing? And we started realizing that in Germany, they very clearly separate different aspects of what the mother, the child, and the family need. So they have very clear adult time. 5 o'clock at night, your kids are at home in bed, and the parents are out investing either in their relationship or with friends, but it's adult time. Even in Oktoberfest, at 5 o'clock, there's no kids. It's adult time, and it's very clear. Everything closes down at 1 on a weekend, on a Saturday. Nothing's open on Sunday, and everything shuts down at 5 because there's a very clear line of family time. This is family time. This is when you spend time with your family. And then there's alone time, where the children are encouraged to go out and build their resilience, stand on their own 2 feet, walk across the street on their own. There's all this stuff. Go to the shop, buy the bread. They do all of this stuff on their own, and it's very clearly marked. And the minute I started seeing this in this culture, I felt like, I've been doing it wrong. You can't do it all at the same time. You have to break it up in your own mind as a family, and you have to go, now's time for the children. Now's time for my friendships and my relationship. Now's time. And that's the only way to do it. And they seemed very balanced and happy with that. And that I definitely took that on afterwards of that separation.
So that example brings up two other questions, and that is, what advice do you have for parents whose relationship with their spouse suffers because they're doing everything and anything, take them to this kid's activity and that kid's activity, and all of a sudden now date night no longer happens, and they're spending so much time making certain that all the kids' needs are met, that their own husband or wife's needs are no longer met?
I think it always goes down to communication, and one of the things I always share with my parents is parenting on the same page. Is your outcome of this child's life and your marriage and everything, are you actually on the same page? And I use my husband as an example, because I'm a artist, and and my husband's and in the army, we're very different, like chalk and cheese. I'm all over here and he's very straight and narrow. But our outcomes for our relationship and for our family are exactly the same. So if he goes this way to get there and I go this way to get there, then you're actually getting to the same point, because you're never going to parent the same. I don't parent like him. He's much harder than me. And he would never parent like me, because he calls me the butterfly sometimes, but I'm very gentle. So I think knowing as a couple what the outcome is. Why are you doing all those trips? Why are you doing this? Why are we doing this? And if you just know the why, everything just feels like it's easier. Why are you doing 20 different trips? Well, because the child is really talented at this, and I really want them to experience this in their life. And that eases the feeling of, oh, I'm left behind, or you don't have time for me, and all of that. So it's just the knowing the why and being on the same page, I think, can alleviate a lot of stress in the home.
Well, that takes us to the next point. We have helicopter parents that they are convinced that their daughter is going to be an Olympic gold medal gymnast, or their son's going to play for the New York Yankees. And with all of this that's happening, they literally dedicate their entire life to creating their child's destiny, and they lose out on themselves. So what advice do you have for that helicopter parent that does too much?
I once met a mom, a very good friend of mine, and I dropped my kids off at school, and I walked up to her at school drop-off in the days I used to walk them into school, and she was raving mad. She was like red-faced, sweating, complaining, and I was like, oh my God, what happened? And she said, I just called my kids assholes. And I was like, and then I thought, that's brilliant. She did not think that her kids were perfect. She knew that all kids have the opportunity and to be assholes. And she called them out straight away to their faces and gave them such a shock. And I realized that parents have to be able to take the rose-tinted glasses off. They have to be able to look at their children and all their faults and sometimes call them out for it. And I think it's, we all think our kids are amazing. I mean, that's what we're wired to do, but every adult who's an arsehole was once a child whose mother never called them out. So I do think.
I love it. So, and it's good in essence to call out your kids when they're doing something wrong, and
Yes.
They're going to respect you more for it, because they're going to learn about their own boundaries.
Who else is going to do it?
Yeah.
Who else?
You can't call somebody else's kid an asshole. Otherwise, you'll have all kinds of issues going on.
Anyway, after that day, I vowed that when the opportunity came, I would call my kids assholes. And it really is, it's okay to call them out. Who else is going to do it?
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I recently called out my adult son on something, so I feel better now because of that. So let's switch gears. We've had a lot of challenges and chaos and drama these last few years. So how have you seen the flu challenges of 2020 and 2021 affect, parents, kids, and families?
I think we all know the negatives, but the positives are that I think everybody got more time. That's the one thing when you ask parents what they got, they're like, oh, I just enjoyed the time, and I enjoyed you take travel out of the equation, and all of a sudden we have more time. And but the one thing I think was people got the opportunity to stop and see what's working in their lives and what's not. And I think that they were able to just simplify things and go, you know what, we don't need to, like you say, we don't need to do all those runaround things, because actually little Johnny doesn't like soccer. We are pushing it. He does actually, you know, we're going to remove soccer because it's just not working for us. Or, you know, do we really need to have, you know, dinner at the table every night? What if we have a picnic once a week? Like, people were able to reassess how they were living their lives and what worked for them and what didn't, just given the time. So I do think that was the one positive thing that happened.
That's wonderful. So what is a positive parenting and why is it so useful? What does that phrase mean? Positive parenting.
So everyone thinks positive parents are airy fairy and, oh, my darling, you're perfect, well done. And it really isn't. It's positive parenting is putting your kids in situations that create a positive outcome. So, you know, you want to put them in a situation, let's say crossing the street, and let them know that you trust them to cross the street and that they can trust themselves, and the outcome is they feel more confident. They feel like you trust them. So that's just one example, but it's just about finding situations in your day that will create resilience in your child, that will make them more secure in who they are. And that isn't always liked. People don't like to be pushed. Kids love to be mollycoddled and looked after, but sometimes you have to, as the parent, step back and go, okay, I'm raising a potential adult here. What is this moment going to help if I help? And sometimes not to. So positive parenting is about the outcome, not about the in the moment thing.
Very
So
good. So do you have examples of aha moments that parents who have worked with you have had? What are some of your clients' aha moments?
I think the one that really sticks with me the most is I had just done a one-to-one with a mom, and she told me she loved being a mom, but she wasn't having any fun. She's like, I just don't understand how moms are supposed to have any fun in this. I can't wait for them to leave so I can have my life back. And we were working one-on-one with her, and I told her a story about Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's the astrophysicist. Tyson, sorry. And he did this, he told the story about that all children are little scientists. And every moment of the day that they go out, they are scientists. And he described scientists as children who never grew up. And he said that what happens is parents stop their child from jumping in that puddle because they're going to get dirty, because it's more work for mom, or they stop them from dropping the egg. You know, they stopped them from banging on the pots and pans. He's like, you've just given up a lesson on percussion, you know, and all these things that mom's like, don't do that. Don't do that. Let's keep the house clean. Keep yourself clean. That's going to make a mess. We don't have time. Anyway, so we were chatting about this with this mom and seeing where it can go in her life. And she called me the next day laughing. She said, I just had the best day with my child. Her child was 10 and she was doing the dishes after dinner. She was trying to rush everyone to bed. And her 10-year-old came up to her and he said, can I open the dishwasher? And she said in her head, she immediately was like, no, we're doing the dishes, we're going to bed. That's the schedule. And she said to him, okay, let's open the dishwasher while it was running. And he opened it and he was gobsmacked that all the water didn't come out. He thought the water filled all the way to the top and he didn't know. So then they went through how a dishwasher works. And she said they spent 45 minutes at that dishwasher and he was so excited. And he just had an engineering lesson right there and all of that. So, she said all of a sudden she started having fun. She was like, oh, this is so much fun to show you things. And I think that sometimes us parents need to just stop and remember that they're just little explorers, little adventurers, they're curious, and they're little scientists. So let them make a mess, because one day they're going to leave the house. I mean, you're at this phase, Patrick, where your kids are getting married. You don't remember the mess cleaning up. You know, you don't remember that. It's going to end.
I do like a clean house. I will tell you that. People say, why do you like your house so clean? I said, because I went through 20 years of chaos, 20 years of mess all over the place. So I like everything in its place. And if you take it out of your place, put it back. So great question. A great answer. Our guest today is Joanne Holbrook. Her book is titled Your Passport to Parenting: wisdom from around the world to help build happy families. For more information, you can visit her online. Her website is yourpassporttoparenting.com. So why do you feel what you are sharing is so important in homes today?
Because I think a lot of parents don't see the joy in the time that they have with their families. And I do think, a lot of moms tell me they're not having fun. I have a friend who doesn't have children, and her reasoning is, well, why would I? All parents do is complain about them. And I think that there is such a fun element to this phase of our lives, and it is just a phase of our lives. It is not forever. And I think that parents think this is forever, and they don't see the joy, and then it ends and they're like, gosh, that ended so quick and I didn't get to do everything that I wanted to do. So I think I bring in the open the dishwasher and don't lecture. And, I've got 110 stories in that book of things that you can do easily. Another story I share all the time is tell your children their birth stories. That for me is a huge one because, that helps children feel like, oh, I have a starting point. And I share all these little things with parents and then help them to figure out how to do it, because not everybody knows how to. So, you can tell your children your birth story, but how do you do it? Well, there's many different ways as they grow and as they get older. And I was interviewed the other day by a 24-year-old who works with teens, and we were chatting about teens, and I told him the birth story, and he went and he said, my mother's never told me that story. And he went off and asked her that day. And he called me the next day and he said his mother and him were in tears because he didn't realize what she went through when he was little and what she did to have him. And he said he used to feel really resentful to her growing up, but he never asked. And he said at 24 years old, that was such a healing thing. So it doesn't end that we want to know that what was going on, why were we wanted, how was our adoption process? How did we come together as a family? What was going on in the world? And he said that was the most healing thing for him and his mom. Like he said, it was such a big connector. But that can happen at any age. From, 2, you just tell the story differently. And at 10, you tell the story differently. And at 15, you tell the story differently. And, all the time. 24, she could tell the story very differently. So it's a story that actually never ends. It just changes on how you share it.
I agree with you so much. And I think one of the challenges with children today, they have no idea how much that mom and dad have sacrificed for them in their early years.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great story about tell the birth story. So I've heard you speak to parents about the energy they bring into the home is the energy absorbed by the kids in the family. So can you explain more about this concept of energy?
So when mom walks in the door or dad walks in the door and they've had a bad day and they've been terrible a day at work, the ride home was terrible, they were in traffic, and they walk in the door and they bring all this ugliness, and the kids will automatically assume it's them because they don't know mom and dad have a life, after dealing with them. So it brings in a lot of bad energy in the home, and the enormity that parents have, this power that parents have in the home is often overlooked because we think we can just come home and let it all hang out. And there is a way to do that. But the first step is to acknowledge that whether we come in negative or positive, it's going to affect the entire family, how the children speak, what they do, is going to be affected by the parents who walk in that door, that energy that they bring in. And I often tell my parents, do an experiment, walk in angry and watch what your children do. They're going to scurry away to their rooms. They're not going to share. They're going to be very closed. They're going to not be very open. And then the next day, walk in as happy as anything, like you're, Disney parent, and watch how they open up. Watch how they just adore being with you. And often what I do is, because all of us have bad days. It's not possible that we all, happy all the time. If I have a bad day, I walk in and I'll tell my kids exactly what's going on. Be like, this is what's happening. I'm feeling like this. I have to get it out my body. Until then, just know it's not you. It's me. I'm just trying to release this bad day. How was your day? I hope it was better than mine. And all of a sudden the kids are like, oh, it wasn't me. And then they'll be fine. And often they'll start counseling you. If they're old enough, they'll start being like, oh, well, you should let it go and all that. They'll tell you what you told them. But it's just giving them that opportunity to change the energy shift. Don't think that they don't understand, because they do. They feel it. They may not know words for it, but they feel it the same. So I do feel like that should be the first thing when you go home or fetch your kids from school or see them, is just to do a little, where am I? Okay, yeah. I'm actually in a terrible mood. I've got to tell them that straight away.
Wow, love it. Brilliant, brilliant advice. You often speak about parenting with an end in mind. Tell us exactly what that means.
So if you started a business or wrote a book, you would get someone to help you. You would have a outline, you would have a goal for the end. In a business, you would have a mission statement and values. And when you're writing a book, you have that very clear skeleton that you know that you want to write the book and how you want it to look. You don't exactly know how it's going to look in the little words and paragraphs, but you know what it's going to look like. And then when everyone has a kid, we all go, well, we'll wing it. Yeah. We'll just leave it. We'll just let it happen. So parenting with the end in mind, I'm always like, okay, you've got this little bundle of joy, or this toddler, or this, tween or something. What do you want for the next 10 or 20 years? And then again, bringing parents on the same page. What do we want? I'm not talking about being the best, gymnast or whatever. I'm talking about, what values are you instilling? What outcomes do you want for your child? What relationship do you want for your child and yourself when you're older? And knowing where you're going is really parenting with the end in mind. And what it does is it stops the wasted time of chattering, and it also stops the lecturing, because if it doesn't matter and it's not in line with your very clear goals for the future, why bother saying it? Why bother teaching it? So, often parents just yakka, 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 and the kids just like over their heads. So having very clear goals helps with that. Just knowing where you're going, just like a business, just like a book.
Helps them get through the adversities and the challenges of teenage years and that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So how does your work support families?
I think it changes perspectives. And I think that is what I do, is I change perspectives and I give them different things to think about. That maybe in your bubble, you just can't see. And it's very hard to look out of your own life and look back in. It's very hard. So I support parents to look out, and then we go in slowly as we need to. I always start with the macro parenting. What does it look like from out here? So it goes back to that caveman days. Is your cave okay? Are you safe? Have you got access to water and all of this? And then we go back into it. So to do that on your own in a busy life where you're just trying to, hit the next time and the next meeting and the next thing that you have to go to, it's very hard to step back. Sometimes you need someone to come and go, okay, I'm going to help you and show you how to start out here, and we're going to come in.
Very good. So as a parenting advocate and a parenting coach, do you offer a complimentary consultation to moms and dads? And if so, how can people get a hold of you to schedule that time with you?
Yeah. People can just text me or email me. And then on my website, there's also a little chat option that they can just contact me on. But in that session, I offer my one-to-one courses, which is truly the best value for money, because you're going to get something just for you. And then I also offer other courses that I do. One of them is just for moms, because there's a difference between a mom and a dad a lot of the time. And then the other one is for moms and dads, and that one's Ignite. And I run those throughout the year. But if you do one-to-ones with me, that's done in your time over time, which we can discuss and share. And
so the best place for them to find your number and that is just on your website, yourpassporttoparenting.com. Or how do people get a hold of you? That's the best place. Start at the website and go from there.
Everything's on the website. All my socials, they all links to all the socials on there. My emails, my chat option, or you can find me on Facebook or Instagram. So I'm always, I go on there all the time as well, and just share little bits of these tidbits every day for parents who just want a little bit of help.
So what do these parents that work with you, what do they get out of that relationship? And what is it that you offer that's different than maybe others in this space?
I work with them. So I work, the first session will really be just letting them know how we work and that. And the second session will always be about them, where they're at. And then I put together a 12-week program, and it has a lot of extras as well. It has printouts for you after the chat, so that you can go back and remember this, because not everybody remembers what they did 6 months ago. So everything is written down. There's extra things for them to read and watch, and I'm always sending, and then they've got access to me through Voxer and Messenger for the whole time that we decide to be together. So in the moment, if something happens and they're like, oh my gosh, I just had this thought, I'm available to them at that time to help them out too. So it really is the best value for money. And then the courses are done online on a Facebook private page, so people can do it whenever they like, and they're just little bits of goodness all put together in a special way, that at the end of it, you are going to feel so clear, and you're going to go from good to great as a parent. So that's really, really what I do. I don't handle situations that I don't think I can handle. I'm not a therapist. I just put together things that are going to help families really find ease in their homes, because that's really what we all want, is just to find ease.
I love it. I love it. And your book, Your Passport to Parenting, how and where can people pick up their copy and purchase that book from you?
They can buy it on my website, and then I'll send it to them, and I'll autograph it and send them a little love letter in it. Or you can get it on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles, Walmart, Target, all of those online websites. And it's also available all around the world. So on every online bookstore.
I love it. Fantastic.
And Audible. The Audible is actually the one that does the most.
How long is that audiobook? Several hours, right?
It's 5.5 hours.
5.5 hours.
Yeah.
That is some time well spent. Every parent should listen to that before they have kids and during. So what do you have coming up now? What's new? What are you working on next?
Well, now that COVID's lifted, I'm getting a lot of speaking events coming up. So if anyone ever wants me to come do a speaking event, or to do online speaking events, I'm going to be doing some libraries speaking events on Zoom, because they're all on the mainland. I live in Hawaii. So yeah, I've got some of that. I'm flying out to do some stuff with the US Special Forces. They want me to come and talk about parenting and communication, and how to get that going. So I do have a lot of things coming up, but I'm keeping my courses going, keeping my one-to-ones going, and bringing in, finally, now that we can get back to normal, the speaking events are now starting to start up again.
Yeah, you're in Oahu and I'm in Maui, and we still need to meet either on your next trip here or my next trip there. We're going to definitely connect up. So 2 more questions. If someone wanted to contact you to learn more about specifically what to do, they just go to the website. So again, that website is Your Passport to Parenting. But the 2 other questions I want to ask, many of us our children are grown and gone, and my kids are 30 and 27, and I survived those parenting years. But I guess I learned when the second one went off to college that this empty nest syndrome is real. What perspectives do you have about when you lose your kids and now they don't need mom and dad, and now your Saturdays and your Sundays are like completely empty, and it's awesome for the first year or so, but then you're like, wait a minute, I've lost my kids. And one of my friends says that parenting is a gift from God, where your children are on rent to you from God for 18 years. And then after that, the video is due back to the video store. And then they're God's kids again, no longer yours. So what quick advice do you have on empty nest syndrome?
Oh, I haven't hit that phase, and I don't want to, but I am prepping for it, definitely. And I speak to a lot of parents about this, and I'm doing my own research for myself too, is going to parents who have been through the situation. And the number one thing I'm seeing is that the parents didn't take time to find out what they wanted before the kids left. You know, they didn't, if they wanted to have that dream, they sort of, the kids left and they were like, oh, I have nothing now. I've dedicated this whole time to my kids. You know, I think while they age and while they mature, they start slowly slipping away. You know, they start hanging out with their friends more. You do get more time. And in that time, I think you need to build your dreams, find out what you want, so that when they go, it's just a little bump instead of a complete fall down, that you can just get back onto your own dreams. Because like I say, children are only with us for a short time. You can't invest your entire dreams in life. We've still got, 40, 50 years after they leave, hopefully, to live our lives just differently with them.
I would tell you, for me, it was re-experiencing the passions of my youth. And I think of all those years I spent coaching their baseball, football, and lacrosse, and all their teams, and soccer, and taking them to and from their games, and shuttling them to and from school and doctor's appointments. I lost my ability or my time to focus on mountain biking, on cycling, on hiking, on doing some of the things that I've learned. And so I think what for me worked is when they all went to college, then I finally got to rediscover who I was. And that was certainly fun to start redoing some of those passions from my youth. So the last question is, Mary and I have named this because Mary, her nickname is Mary Unstoppable West, because everybody that knows her knows that she's unstoppable in every area of her life. And so we've named this the Patrick and Mary Unstoppable Author Interview Series. So I want to ask you, as a woman, as a wife, as a parent, as a humanitarian to this earth, what does the word unstoppable mean to you? How would you define it?
And I'd consider it normal. just doing what we do. I think that most people are I think being curious and fearless is probably how I would do it. A lot of people overthink things and end up not doing them. And I think sometimes it's just about doing it,
Maybe allowing that scientist to always be with you in your adult years, like you said.
The minute we stop being curious, it just gets dull. I don't think we were meant to be here to be dull and live a dull life. I think even if you live a smaller life, it can still have sunrises and sunsets and all of that make you curious. Anything.
Keep learning, keep growing, keep being curious. Great advice. Again, our guest today, Joanne Holbrook. Her book is Your Passport to Parenting. You can find her online at yourpassporttoparenting.com. Joanne, we'd love if you could stick around for 10, 12, 15 minutes to do a Q&A with our live audience, and then hear any comments, thoughts, or suggestions. Are you willing to stay with us for a bit?
Of course, of course.
All right, let's give Joanne a big hand, and we will officially end this interview, and we're going to put you here in the gallery mode. And those of you that have questions, down here in the bottom of your screen is the reactions button. You can raise your hand to ask your question, or you can also put your hand up like this, whichever is better. So who here in our listening audience has questions, comments, feedback for Miss Joanne Holbrook? Who's going to be first? Mary, I can see your mind spinning. Go right ahead, Mary.
Yeah. Thank you, Joanne. I think that every parent should have your book. You have so many, such great advice. And I loved the one where you talked about to never lecture your children, and instead get them to ask you questions. I think that is a really good idea. And then also, I liked how you talked about to expose them to all kinds of people. And I think that's great advice too. You have so much great advice. I think every parent needs your book. So thank you for being on today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, let's go to Valerie Harris. Valerie, go ahead.
Joanne, always loved it when you came and spoke before, and I learned something all the time, and I too am a military brat. I mean, I've been to 13 different schools. My kids are military brats. My husband spent 20 years in the Navy. So, and my parents are military brats. We go back to World War I. So Love the
Wow.
traveling thing. Never been to Germany. That's the one duty station we never got. My dad was always the Pacific and my husband always in the Pacific. But I love that Germany, how you were talking about they shut down and separate that time for family, time for kids, to go be self-sufficient, and then also that time for adults, for whether it's connecting with your husband or your spouse or whatever, or connecting with friends and stuff. We should totally start doing that. I don't think Americans do that enough. We're so rigid and whatever. We don't do that enough. And the lecture thing, that's another good one, because I am a lecturer. I guess my dad was a hardcore gun-ho Vietnam veteran, kind of Marine, so he did that with us, and I turned around and did it with my children as well. But I still have a 15-year-old at home, so maybe it's not too late to stop lecturing and start talking.
It's not too late. It's not too late, and you can change it yourself, get them involved. And, I always say to my kids, you don't have to have the same opinion as me, and we'll talk about politics, and you just start hearing them. It's not about what you say. It's about allowing the communication to go both ways, because your 15-year-old, I've also got a 15-year-old, and they're interesting because, they're starting to build opinions, and they're starting to build their own self, how they see themselves in the world. So now it's perfect actually for you to, start doing that. And, the other day I told my kid about a girl who's got her scholarship revoked because she was caught drinking at a party. And I didn't tell her, you're not allowed to drink at parties. I just said, hey, did you hear what happened to so-and-so?
Right.
And all of a sudden she was like, what? And I said, no, she was studying to be a nurse. She got a full scholarship. She was caught, that got raided. The police arrived. She was caught holding a beer, scholarship revoked. I didn't have to say anything else. I didn't have to do the lecture, because she spoke about that story for like a month to me. I didn't bring it up. I'm like, tick, done, lesson learned.
Awesome. That's awesome. Thank you, though. Great information. A lot of great tips and nuggets. I love it. Love it. Love it.
Thank
Very
you.
good.
Thank you.
Who else has questions, comments, thoughts? Ann Peters, John Webster, the other Valerie, anybody else? Kara Soto, comments, questions, thoughts? Go right ahead.
I bet John could teach us a few things with all his kids.
John, go right ahead.
He's got all the ages.
Yeah, I do. It's a bit of a mixed family, but yeah, I have 7 kids all together right now. Possibly more on the way at some point. But so the question I have is, and I've read a lot of parenting books as well. And one of the ones that has a method that has stuck out with me the most has been love and logic. Have you ever heard of that? And if so, what would be your thoughts on that?
I'm not familiar with the book.
It's love and it's called Parenting with Love and Logic. I think it's by Foster Klein.
Oh no, I must look at that one. No, but it makes sense to me. I mean, teaching our children how to think, and that is very important,
Right.
and I think that's a big deal, and like I was saying to Valerie, I think, listening to what they think as well, and then harnessing that way of whatever, if they're talking about politics now, because that's always in the news lately, what do you think about that? And sometimes they steer really the wrong way, and just being able to
Right.
bring them back gently. And I think definitely, I think it's all about communication. I think at the end of the day, whether you're communicating love or lessons or whatever, I think that you have to have good communication. And that is a very hard thing. Any fight is always about lack of communication. Any irritation, anytime we're angry with anybody, it's because we haven't communicated. So I think teaching our children how to communicate and think for themselves is number one.
Well, and I think a good point to that is, I'm surprised how many children grow up never hearing the words "I love you" from either their mom or dad. And I'm blown away as to how many people that way. My parents were very good at saying that to us children. How important is that? And why do many parents not say that? Maybe they don't love themselves, or I don't know. What are your thoughts on the importance of saying "I love you" to your children?
9 out of 10 times, if I speak to parents like that, mostly what happens is, oh, my parents never told me. A lot of times I always say 90% of your parenting is how you were parented. So if you go back on that, you'll probably find their parents didn't say it, so they don't say it. And that's where I call a little BS, because, we're adults now. You can look back and go, that didn't feel good. I'm going to do the opposite, and that kind of thing. And so I think that we have to be able to be adults sometimes in the relationship, in our children's relationship, and not be the quiet one on anything. If it didn't work for you, change it, do it differently.
That's brilliant. Any pains that you had in your younger years, I guess acknowledge that didn't feel good, so I'm going to change it. Brilliant advice.
Mr. Rogers said, he did this talk once. He was interviewed by Oprah, and she said, what's the number one parenting advice you have? And he said, always go back to your own childhood and remember how it feels to be a child. And I spoke to someone about that, and they disagreed with me. They were like, I hated my childhood. I don't want to remember my childhood. I remember my parents fighting. I remember my dad putting his hand through the wall. I don't want to go back and remember my childhood. And I said to him, no, but do you do that in front of your children? And he said, no, I wouldn't. And I said, but that's the lesson. The lesson was, don't fight in front of your children because you remember as a child how that felt. And don't put your hand through a wall because you know what it felt like to see your dad get so angry at your mother. And he was like, no, I'd never fight in front of my kids. I said, that's the lesson. So whether it's negative or positive, you have to sometimes remember how it feels to be a child. And you have to go and say, that was bad. I'm not doing that. I'm going to do the opposite because that feels good.
What do you do when your children throw a ball through the wall? Because that's happened to me. Playing the
I'll show you the room next door. There's a hole in my window. Right next door.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Kids tend to damage things. Okay. Ann Peters, what are your thoughts?
Well, I got one better. My son threw a rock through a windshield of a moving car. And the man driving that car was just coming home from the hospital after having a heart attack.
Wow.
He was not the only one throwing rocks. The entire neighborhood was throwing rocks. All the kids in the neighborhood ran after that, except for my son and daughter, who stayed to own up to their mistakes.
Good job, Mom. Good
Wow.
So
job.
I did something right. Although why he was throwing rocks across the street while cars were moving, I have no idea. I guess because peer pressure, everybody else was doing it.
Yeah.
I think we underestimate how underdeveloped our children's brains are a lot of the time. I think, sometimes we have to remember that they're not fully developed.
Yeah.
They do stupid things.
He eventually grew up to become an Eagle Scout, and he served time in the military. So he turned out to be quite a great kid.
You see,
Love it.
but that's good parenting too,
All right, Kara, do you have any comments or thoughts or questions? Otherwise, we are going to turn it back to Mary, and then we can do the group photo. So if you have a copy of Joanne's book, hold it up. And Mary, it's back to you. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. Next week, same time, same Zoom, same password. Luis Rojas, his book is The Answer is Love. So join in next week for The Answer is Love. So Mary, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Joanne. This was fantastic. Loved it, loved it, loved it. Thank you all for being here, and encourage you to be here every Thursday if you can, and invite friends. So Valerie will go ahead and take a photo, and then I want to remind the other Valerie and Patrick to stay on after. So thank you all for being here today.
All right. So
Thank you, everybody.
Oh, thank you.
You're amazing.
All right. Is everybody ready? Smiling, lip gloss,
Joanne, you got to
hair.
hold up your book. You got to get a book to hold up. There we go.
All right. Everybody smile. 1, 2, 3. Got it.
All right. Well, thank you, and everyone have a great rest of the week. We'll see you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
everybody. Thanks, Mary. Thanks,
Thank you,
Valerie.
Joanne.
Thanks,
You're
Patrick.
amazing.
Cheers.
God bless.